guys, so today I'm going to be doing a review of After the Woods by Kim Savage. So this is a YA, I would say, kind of thriller. It came out sometime this year, I can't remember which month, but it was one that I was really looking forward to because it sounded really good. It was about a girl who got abducted and survived for 2 days and then made it out of the woods where she'd been kept. So the story kind of follows the aftermath of how her life is after that and kind of mysteries that kind of have gone unresolved. So I was really looking forward to this, and I think possibly because I was looking forward to it so much, maybe my expectations were a bit high because I ended up not really liking it very much. I in some ways did enjoy reading it. I couldn't put it down. I wanted to know the ending and that kind of thing, so in that way it was really good. It was quite fast paced and stuff, but at the same time there were a lot of things that I really didn't like about this book. I'm not going to be sharing any spoilers in this review. I'm just going to tell you my thoughts on some different things, and then I would still say if you really like YA and if you like thrillers and that kind of thing, you might still like this book, but there were just things that I really didn't like about it. But I'm still glad that I read it anyway. The main thing that I kind of had a problem with was the fact that it was quite predictable, so I'd kind of guessed the twist right from the beginning. I kind of had an idea of what was going to happen. At the same time, even though it was predictable, I think it was more predictable just because of how things were hinted at. The story in itself was actually, it felt very sort of contrived and nothing really made sense. Like, you have a full, by the end of the story you have a full understanding of everything that's happened, but it just doesn't seem like something that would happen. I just don't think it was a realistic sort of scenario that plays out in this book. I don't know, the whole story just seemed very like fake, which seems dumb because it is fiction. But you know how even fantasy books sometimes can seem like real, like you really feel all the things and all that because you believe in it? This just had none of that. It's not even a fantasy book, and I just didn't believe anything that was going on in it. I also found that the tone of this book wasn't really what I was after. I think mostly it was because it was told in first person, and the protagonist she's meant to be 16 or 17, I believe, but she reads very young. She seems like a much younger character in my opinion. In my opinion, she kind of had a voice that was more like a tween kind of age, and if you're an adult or a young adult and you've read books like that before, where the voice is, you know, of a much younger person, it can be kind of irritating to read if you're not in that age anymore, just because you expect a kind of level of maturity, and that's the expectation I had of this book, and that maturity kind of wasn't there. So in that way, because of that being the voice throughout the entire novel, I just found that it didn't have the tone I was looking for. I was expecting it to be quite dark and quite raw, especially looking at the cover. It looks very dark, and it was just more like lighthearted, which seemed really weird to me. The character has quite a good sense of humor, which that is fine, but I just think for a book like this I didn't really want a character like that, and she kind of like jokes about things that you wouldn't really joke about. So I get using humor as a coping thing, but it kind of wasn't done in that way. Throughout this whole story, she's wanting to confront her issues head on, and she's wanting to deal with them. She wants to know everything about everything so that she can, you know, get through it and get over it and move herself past these things. And she thinks that she's not going to be able to get past them and move on with her life until she has a complete understanding of the whole situation. And everyone else in her life is kind of trying to protect her and shelter her and doesn't want her to know all of these things because they think it's only going to make her feel worse or whatever. So I just think the whole humor, like brushing things over thing versus this, her like need to know everything and be open about everything and talk about everything, was very like contradictory in terms of her character, so I didn't really like that. One little thing that bugged me, they were making this big point about girls being, I guess girls being like feminine and innocent and all this kind of stuff, and the, you know, that stereotype versus this main character and just how she was. And the way they emphasize this, instead of talking about it as an issue, they would just put girl in capital letters every time it was like a stereotypical girl, and it kind of backfires because instead of pointing out, you know, how silly that thing is and how people should just be people and whatever, instead it just insulted certain characters because certain people should be talking about and should call them a girl in capital letters like it was an insult. And yeah, I just didn't like that. It was, and also it's just annoying to read, you know, be reading and then there's like girl in capital letters that just stands out at you for no reason. It just reminded me of Shatter Me. You know how there's like sentences that are crossed out and words that are crossed out all the way through? Just, it gets annoying and it's too like in your face trying to make a point. So didn't like that. The final thing I will mention that I didn't like about this book, unfortunately, like I said, there were a lot of things I didn't like, were the way that issues were not really dealt with in a good way at all. I think there were a lot of different hard sort of heavy topics that are thrown into this book, and not many of them really get dealt with. It deals with PTSD, it deals with suicide, it deals with eating disorders, obviously, you know, abuse. Yeah, it deals with all of these different things, but when I say deals with, some of them get mentioned once and then kind of left alone. I just think that the author obviously has no experience with those issues if she's just gonna kind of like throw them in and then ignore them for the rest of the novel, or just throw them in without really any sensitivity, I guess. The whole thing was just very lighthearted and la-di-da, but there's all these serious issues mixed in there. It just didn't feel right. So that was kind of the main thing about this book for me, is that it just didn't feel right for what it was. So I ended up giving it 2 stars on Goodreads. If you've read this, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want to read it, like I said, I still recommend it. It was a really fast-paced read, and I'm glad that I read it. I just was disappointed by those things that I mentioned, but obviously it's like a whole book. There's a whole lot else more to it. Let me know your thoughts, like I said, if you've read it. If you want to follow me on Goodreads, that's always linked down below if you want to read my review of this. That's it. Subscribe if you haven't already. I upload 2 days a week, and I will see you guys with my next video. Bye.